Hi guys, welcome back to my channel. Thank you so much for joining me today. It is such a privilege to have you guys come back. You guys are super supportive. Thank you so much. I really, really appreciate it. If you are new here, my name is Ore. I am a pharmacist living and working in Ontario, Canada. I'm also licensed in the United Kingdom. So I share my tips, my journey, my process, all the different things about being a transatlantic pharmacist. And I also bring people on here to share their stories, their journeys, and basically to inspire us. So today I have a phenomenal guest with me. I have collaborated with this person in the past, and I'm super excited to have them here on my channel. I have the amazing Dr. Aska Patel. Dr. Aska Patel is a pharmacist, an entrepreneur, a patient advocate, and a thought leader in healthcare. She completed her Bachelor of Pharmacy from the University of Waterloo in the year 2012, and she went back to the same university to complete her Doctor of Pharmacy degree in 2016. Since then, she has worked in community, hospital, government, and home care settings. She recently launched her entrepreneurial venture, providing healthcare consulting whilst joining a digital health venture as a startup advisor. Dr. Aska is passionate about creating opportunities for women in STEM and advocates to create networking and mentorship opportunities for women in pharmacy. As a passionate advocate for equitable healthcare by breaking down barriers to care, Aska is part of various committees at various provincial, national, and global organizations. In her spare time, Aska enjoys spending time with her family. She enjoys traveling, keeping active, and exploring new cuisines. Aska has been selected to represent Canada at the G20 Young Entrepreneurs Alliance Summit in 2022 and this year, the year 2023. And she has conducted many other speaking engagements. I am super excited to have Dr. Aska Patel join me today. This conversation is going to be heavy. It's going to be full. It's going to be super inspiring. So make sure you keep watching. Hi, Aska. Thank you so much for joining me today. It's so amazing to have you. It's always nice to speak with you, but actually more exciting to have me interviewing you this time. So thank you so much for joining.
Thank you so much, Mary. I mean, as I was saying, I don't get to be on this other side of the table a lot, so I'm kind of excited, a little nervous. I hope I do justice to, this amazing platform that you have created and curated, and, it's an honor to be here. Thank you very much.
Thank you so much. So I want to jump right into it and basically start by asking you to share a bit about yourself, something different that maybe not many people know.
Sure. So something fun, I can certainly tell you. I've been trained in Indian classical dance.
Wow.
Thank you. Something not a lot of people know, and I think it's a side that I don't show professionally, is I love to dance. And so yeah, that's something fun. That's a fun side of me. So if when I have my hair loose and I'm not wearing the professional white lab coat, it's very easy for me to start grooving to good music. Doesn't matter
so
what
cool.
the music
You have
is.
to teach me one day. You will definitely have to teach me, because I definitely want to learn different styles of dancing. So
absolutely,
yeah, that's something we should do one day for sure.
Absolutely. And just kind of also like, culturally, we also have a season in sometime like October, November, usually, where it's just 9 nights of dancing to kind of honor the feminine and the women, the divine power that lies within the woman. It's really what the festival, kind of celebrates. So we call it Garba, which is Gujarati. It's basically 9 nights of dancing. And I would love to take you on one of the festivals, because we have them really big here in Toronto as well. Like, we pack up stadiums of people who just come in and dance the night away. So I would love to show you that too.
Yeah, that would be so fun. I'm going to definitely take you up on that. It would be really good to go. Aside from, dancing and all the great things, you're also a pharmacist. So let's share a little bit about that. Like, how did you get into pharmacy? What do you do now in terms of your day-to-day as a pharmacist? And then we'll get into digging deep into some of the other interesting facts and areas of your professional journey.
Absolutely. So I guess I'll start with how I decided to become a pharmacist. It was kind of fluke. When we moved, I was 12 years old when I moved from India to Canada. And when we moved, my dream was, I was a very studious kid, when I was younger. I loved my books, and my world was my books. And it was confirmed in my head that I was going to become a physician, a surgeon, a neurosurgeon at that. Like, that was my dream goal. And when I came to Canada, in high school here, we had to do what we call 40 hours of volunteering. It's just a way to kind of give back to the community while you're in high school. And because it was only my second year in high school, I did not know where else to go, or I did not know how to navigate, like, what is even volunteering? Like, I think that's where the immigrant, the lack of awareness kind of kicked in. Yeah. So my dad, he had a friend who owned a pharmacy at that time. So he asked him, and he said, sure, she can come and help, with our on the weekends when we do some clinics, and when we have patients coming in, she can help just guide them and all that. So I was like, fine. Decided to just give it a shot, because that's the way I'll get the 40 hours done and I won't have to worry about it at a later point. And lo and behold, that one opportunity really changed the way I saw pharmacy. Because, back in India at that time, pharmacy and pharmacists did not necessarily have a very professional presence, because it was more like a chemist shop where you just go to them and you just pick up the pills from them, and that's it. Like, there's nothing else involved in that encounter. No education being provided or nothing else. So after, being exposed to that, I really enjoyed the role where, it was like you were able to actually speak to patients. You were able to, I saw the pharmacist, being able to make an impact. I saw patients were waiting to see this pharmacist because they wanted to ask him the question, right? And I was like, wow, okay, there's something here that I may be missing. That led me to do a couple of co-op terms in high school as well. And, I think that's kind of sealed the deal for me at that point. I was like, you know what, I think I really enjoyed this career. It gave me a lot of flexibility. And so I have not looked back since then. Kind of the physician career went down the drain hole. I think I never had any second thoughts at that point in time. Once I decided that this was it. I did my undergrad, and then I applied for pharmacy school, got into Waterloo. 2012, graduated with my first Bachelor's of Science in Pharmacy degree. Did community pharmacy for I'd say about 4 years. And then, even while the entire time when I was doing my undergrad and my pharmacy school, I was working in community pharmacy on the weekends. So had built up a significant amount of time in community pharmacy. So I was like, where do I see my future? My future was community pharmacy. Go up, climb up the ladder, and at one point own a store, right? Like that was a dream at that point. Life does not follow the way you dream about it. I was very convinced that I had everything that I needed to kind of climb up that ladder, but did not necessarily have those reality checks. And neither did I have mentors or that feedback provided to me at that time, which would have helped me, at least improve on those skills that I would have needed. There was a point in time where I was applying for jobs and I was getting rejected or not even being interviewed and not being not even being considered. And I'm like, what am I doing wrong? Like, what is going on here? Like, I'm not happy with the role that I'm having in community pharmacy where we were trained to be clinical practitioners where, you're doing all these medication management and all of that. But community pharmacy at that time was very different. Like all you were doing was like checking prescriptions and like putting a label on and like, trying to navigate staffing issues and all that. And I'm like, this is not what I signed up for. Like this, like it's nowhere close to it. And so decided to go back to school, to pharmacy to get my PharmD. That opened the door for hospital, and, worked at Humber River for about 1.5 years. And then pivoted into home care, where I started to work with the local health integration networks as their home care consulting pharmacist. So that really is a role that I continue to still practice in, because it's so rewarding when you're able to connect with patients in the comfort of their homes. Trying to help answer their questions, trying to help manage their medications. And I don't do any dispensing. So, it's kind of like I'm really practicing to the fullest of my potential here. And then during the pandemic, I think I was really at a point where personally and professionally, I was really questioning, where do I go next and what do I do? And, what is it that really brings me joy in terms of the work that I do? And I think at that point, I decided to kind of pivot into digital health, start my own advisory and consulting firm. And, we have been growing and started a podcast in 2021. So it's been, the pandemic has been a blessing in disguise for me, for sure. I have tried my hands at a lot of different things. And I think I'm finally in a space where I'm very happy where I am professionally. And I can see the path ahead, but I'm also learning from my life lessons. I'm not stuck to that path. I know that if there's anything that comes up in terms of a challenge, I know I'll be able to manage it.
See, you're a woman of so many different skills and talents, and like different, as you said, you have so many different areas that you've basically been able to dip your hands into and pick up skills on. Now, there's something really, really big that I wanted to read to actually open up this kind of part of the conversation that we're going in, because we started talking about, and you mentioned so many different things that help to essentially lead the path into where we're going in this discussion. And one of the things you mentioned is when you were back in India, similar to actually many, I would say, like countries like Nigeria, India, and maybe even like countries in the Middle East as well. Pharmacy is, or pharmacists are seen as people who just stand in the store. You go there, you pick up your medicines, the doctor's giving you a prescription and you just go and pick it up. You either buy it or, whatever, there's no counseling. And it's funny because when we come to the Western world and we come to places like Canada or the UK or other countries, just alike, it's similar, but in a very subtle way. So community pharmacists are seen as people who just, again, just follow the doctor's orders. And yes, we now have pharmacists who are asking questions, they're giving, directions, they're counseling, we even have pharmacists prescribing, but it took us a long time in the Western world to get to this point, right? But there are still very like subtle things that kind of show that the level that pharmacists are placed in terms of the healthcare chain is not as high as other professionals. Now, I saw something on LinkedIn, I think just yesterday, and I was like, I have to reshare this and I have to talk about this on our conversation today. So this is a statement from someone, and I'm going to put the post in the video here. And it says, pharmacists must charge for their time. Their time is valuable. Their knowledge is valuable. You can't walk into any other doctorate level profession and get a free 30-minute consultation with a practitioner. Now, I read that and I was like, this is so true. It's so true. And it just made me start to think about entrepreneurship and pharmacy, and how many pharmacists, as you mentioned, the pandemic really kind of enlightened us, because we were almost, aside from nurses and doctors, we were the third healthcare professional that was still running, even in the pandemic. Even dentists were not allowed to really operate because of, the mouth and COVID and all that kind of stuff. And it just made me start to think about pharmacists jumping into the entrepreneurial space, and how people and the public will, accept or take that on. Because for a long time, pharmacists have just been seen as the people who, my doctor tells me what to take, I take as a pharmacist, and they just follow the direction. So I feel like now I'm seeing lots of pharmacists like yourself and others who are jumping into full-time entrepreneurship or doing it on the side. And I don't know how that is accepted by other people, but, I think that seeing more and more people do it is very encouraging, and it encourages other people, because now I speak to pharmacy students and people who are, just about to qualify as pharmacists, and they are like, I want to go into entrepreneurship. That's something I would have never thought of when I was in pharmacy school, because, it wasn't that popular, right?
Exactly.
So I want you to kind of share on how you kind of got into that space of having your own business. You do a podcast, you have a podcast, and the podcast is, again, focusing on healthcare. You're doing lots of things on digital healthcare, and basically how your career is transitioned and how pharmacy is transitioning. And maybe speak to, like, what other pharmacists who may want to go into the same space, what they should expect, what kind of things have you seen, and how have you overcome some of those barriers? It's a very loaded question, but
definitely. No, it's a great question. And it's something I always continue to this date. It's something I question, even to myself, right? Because I think one thing that I have learned as an entrepreneur is no one day is alike. You are, every day is a new story. It's a new challenge. Like, you wrap up a day and that's the end of that. You're never going to see that day again. You're going to have a new day in front of you. I think when I decided to make that shift into entrepreneurship, it was more so because I could not find opportunities that I wanted or that I would have liked to be a part of. And so I was like, you know what, if so many doors are closing and I'm not really sure how to kind of navigate. So I think I took the easy way out at that point, was like, you know what, forget it. I'm not going to prove my mettle here. I'm just going to start something of my own. Little did I know that was not the easy route to take. Right? Entrepreneurship's never easy. It never is. But at the same time, like, the amount of flexibility has provided to me, and the amount of, just having that independence to, carve the path that I want to create, or carve a career that I want to create for myself. I could not, I know for a fact, like, you can never find it anywhere else. When you are your own boss, you have that flexibility. Now, mind you, it comes with its own downfalls too. Initially when you're starting off, like the first year and a half, you're not making any money per se. So it's like, how will you survive? And do you have enough to survive that time? as you're building, your business, will you have enough in the tank to fulfill all your other responsibilities that you may have? So that's something definitely I encourage anyone who's thinking of entrepreneurship is to consider that and make sure you have that back, that cushion, in case if you need to ever fall upon that. And you will, trust me, at some point in time, you will have to use your own funds to do a lot of this, work, because there is not enough funding out there to support every single entrepreneur who's looking to start a business. And so I think that's like, one piece of advice that I can share is, make sure you have that financial backing, just enough so that you can survive without having to be too worked up and like trying to juggle too many things at the same time. Because entrepreneurship is more than full time. That is guaranteed. It's like any time that I have that I'm like, awake, it's like either I'm thinking of my business, what is it that I do next, right? So it takes up significant amount of your time. So do you have the time to even give to that, right? But I think what has really changed for pharmacy, especially since the pandemic, and as you rightly mentioned, when you're saying earlier, we were open during the pandemic, and we were one of the only publicly in the community available healthcare providers. Like physicians, like family physicians had closed their doors, and they were like, we're only talking to you over the phone or like through a virtual setup, right? We're not talking to you otherwise. But pharmacists and pharmacy technicians and pharmacy staff are the only ones who are going into work, showing up every single day. So I think that has helped us leverage a bit of value, but it's still not enough to, for the entire community to realize what is it that we bring. I think for pharmacists, even before the pandemic, if for some odd reason, the pharmacy profession was always targeted as this business-driven profession, whereas I like to think that every single healthcare profession is business-driven. It's just a fact that physicians, because in Canada, we don't pay for physician fees. That's the only thing, but they do get paid for it by someone else. And we are paying our taxes, so it's kind of like we're paying. But it's just something. It's like this cause that's lost upon us. For some odd reason, we think that physician services are free, and they're all benevolent. They are benevolent. Don't get me wrong. Like, I think healthcare providers, we have a lot of benevolence in us, and that's the reason why we choose to be in this profession in the first place. However, we're all business driven. At the end of the day, we need to make our ends meet so that we can survive and continue to provide our services to our patients. But for some odd reason, pharmacy was always targeted as, you are the money making machine here, and and I think that's where the bad reputation kind of gets aligned to us. And I'm seeing that the advocacy work is helping us change that image a little bit, but I think it's a while to go before we get there. However, I do have hopes that, with the changing healthcare system, I feel like the profession will change and it'll actually provide pharmacy professionals with a lot more opportunities to diverge into, like, and start their own businesses. Like, I'm seeing pharmacists take on consulting positions with niche areas, right? Like, a couple of my classmates are doing that. So many of my peers that I know are doing that, especially down south in the US. It's a growing trend, and we're seeing the effects of it coming into here as well. I don't think you should ever limit yourself as a pharmacist, even after you receive your training, to just, think of yourself that you're only limited to innovating in the space of clinical areas only. There's so many other areas. I don't do clinical work in that sense. Like, I started my business because for digital health, like that's what I started my business for. It's like we were helping startups trying to figure out what's the best way to launch their products, or what's the market niche that they need to address, or the market gap that they need to address. Because a lot of the times, all these startup founders, especially if they don't have a clinician on their founders team, they don't necessarily understand the nuances of the industry. And it's like, you're trying to create something, but is there really a need for it? And, how do we bridge that gap? So that's where we kind of come in to kind of help support them. All I'm saying is keep your mind open, like follow the path that you really think that it resonates with you, and that you have expertise that you can kind of provide input into. Doesn't necessarily have to be clinical all the time, but if it is clinical, there's still a lot of doors open for that too.
One of the things you said that really spoke to me was, you kind of said it, I'm going to paraphrase it, but if you don't see the opportunity that you want for yourself, create the opportunity by yourself for yourself. And I think that's what's happening with a lot of people. And I guess you answered the question already, but like, pharmacists are allowed to be entrepreneurs. We shouldn't just be. And it's funny because, as you said, doctors are still getting paid for the work they do, whether we see it or not. And what's more funny is, I think that when we look at patients who maybe seek specialist doctors for certain things, for example, if I'm looking for, the other day I was looking for a dermatologist, right?
Mm-hmm.
A lot of this stuff isn't covered. It's not covered, and
Exactly.
even if it was covered, the government would pay for it. But either way, I would have to pay out of pocket, right? And these are doctors who are trained, they're healthcare professionals. And I feel like patients or the public wouldn't have any issues paying for those services, but they will have issues paying for services, pharmacists, and even nurses, because I feel like sometimes they think that as pharmacists and nurses, we are just the people who follow orders, essentially.
Yes.
And I, as you said, I want to see more people kind of throwing themselves into that mindset that as a pharmacist, I don't have to just limit myself. I think sometimes people get concerned about what other people's opinions may be of that. It's happening a lot where people are like, well, as a pharmacist, you shouldn't be doing that. I see lots of videos on TikTok and Instagram where, people are complaining that, oh, well, the doctor told you to do this. Why are you not doing it? Your job is just to listen to the orders. So it's very, very admirable to see someone like yourself doing and putting yourself in these places that are not necessarily just clinical. Now, obviously, you must have had to overcome barriers. So what are some of the barriers that you've had to overcome and kind of the hurdles you've had to jump through? Because I think being able to share and hear that will encourage other people to go for it, and to push through. So how have you navigated some of those things?
I always think of it like, if I'm able to share my barriers, I think the better, because if I'm able to show you how I overcame that, hopefully you will never have to face that barrier, right?
Yes.
We all have to face certain barriers in this journey of ours. But if we're able to share these lessons, I feel like it's of so much value to somebody else who might be wanting to pursue this similar path. I think the first one, then, and this is again, like in line with what you were saying earlier, you're perceived as people that, take orders from others, right? And so when I started approaching or when I started working with, these startup founders, it was interesting because they would say, you're a pharmacist and you're doing this? Like, what? This does not make sense. Aren't you supposed to be in a store? And, I mean, as much as it hurts to hear this at first glance, I always firmly believe that these are opportunities for me to advocate and educate.
Yes.
Much like, I do have quite a bit of patience to tolerate this. So I'll take this as long as you're willing to hear what my next part is, because you got your say, now you're going to hear what I have to say about this, right?
Yeah.
But I think that's what we're missing in our profession is we're not willing to, we're not comfortable having these tough conversations. And to be honest, I was not comfortable with this either. This is something I had to learn over time, because what you will start noticing is if you don't start to, advocate for yourself, no one else is going to do it for you.
Yes.
And if you want to create a journey for yourself, you'll have to at some point advocate for yourself, and you need to be comfortable to do it in a very convincing, but not just convincing, but like something that leads to a positive outcome. You can't, you can't just start to have an argument out of it, because that will defeat the entire purpose of it. But at the same time, it's like, how do you take this opportunity to not only share what you are bringing to the table, but also kind of, showing what our profession is capable of doing. Our profession does not get a lot of credit because we often work a lot of the time behind closed doors.
Yes.
We're kind of like ghostwriters, to be honest, for positions. Like we really are. Think of it, like how many errors do we save physicians from, or nurse practitioners from? Like, right? Like, and I have like, friends, like amazing friends who are nurse practitioners, they do incredible work, but they are like, Ashka, if I have a medication related problem, I'm coming to you because I am not trained in this. Like, I'm coming to you for this. Like, that's what and I'm seeing that with the newer generation of physicians, nurse practitioners. I'm seeing that change happen where we're understanding where our limitations are. And listen, it's the same for me. It's like, I'm not trained to diagnose things. So when I have issues or when I'm running into situations where differential diagnosis is required, obviously I'm going to make sure I seek the right input. But I think what we need to be feeling more comfortable doing is being able to advocate for ourselves, being able to advocate for the value we bring to the table. And I think pharmacy is such a versatile profession. We get trained in so many different skills that are critical thinking, to problem solving. I think we're really great problem solvers as a profession.
Yes,
to be
we
honest.
are. Yeah.
But it's a very undertapped and underutilized and under appreciated skill set,
Yes.
right?
Yes.
We are able to, like, on a weekend, you're trying to figure out what this patient's physician has prescribed for them, because nobody can read it except we can't read it, right? Like, we're supposed to read these things, but we can't. But here we are still working with the patient and, like, trying to do the best, even if we can't reach the physician, to figure out what we can do for our patient, right? Like, we're obviously, I think 99.9% of the time we'll leave the patient, make sure that the patient has the right medication with them before they leave. But I think it's we don't talk about these enough, and I think that's where the challenge lies in terms of being able to create that value for ourselves within the system. And I think my last barrier is really navigating entrepreneurship, to be honest. Like, nobody teaches you how to be an entrepreneur, especially in pharmacy school. Nobody teaches you that. I mean, we have a business course, but that was not enough to, make me comfortable. Nobody teaches you taxes. Nobody teaches you, like, how to hire professionals, like an accountant and a lawyer and all of that stuff, how to start your company. Like, nobody teaches you that. And I think that in itself is a hurdle, but I would highly encourage you to just, put yourself into that process. As long as you have a convincing idea that you are very dedicated to, just throw yourself into it. Just go with the flow, and don't think too much about how am I going to do this. Like, you will figure out the way, and just make sure you network with people who can potentially help you.
You mentioned something. I mean, if there are any deans or professors at universities watching this, I think something to include in the pharmacy program is entrepreneurship, business management, things like that. And not just how to manage a pharmacy store, because not everybody wants to do that, but just how to navigate entrepreneurship and manage a business, essentially. And these are very important things. I wanted to touch on a couple of last things, just as we're kind of wrapping up. And it's something super exciting. I guess pertaining to you and the work that you do. You're a speaker, you get, I guess, what's the word I'm looking for? You get nominated for awards and so many things like that. So you are going to be one of the entrepreneurs of G20 Summit. I want you to talk a little bit about that. That's super exciting. Congratulations, first of all, because I know this is the second year in a row, because I know I saw you on the poster last year, and I saw you again this year. And it's super exciting. I think speaking and being nominated, being recognized is such an important part of anybody's career. So how do you get yourself out there into that space, and how do you get yourself globally recognized? That's very, very important to, I guess, like I said, for an entrepreneur, for any professional to be able to get to a point where your work has been recognized nationally and globally. How did you put yourself into those spaces?
I to be honest, it was not something I had ever planned, or it was not even a goal that I had, that, this is what I wanted to get my business into or anything like that. But I think one thing that I know that I'm very comfortable with is saying yes to opportunities, even if I am not 100% ready for it. I will, I'll jump on it, and then we'll figure it out as we get to it, as we get through it. Like, that's the philosophy I live by. And I think now that once you become an entrepreneur, you have to be very comfortable with that, where you may never be 100% ready for a project, or never be 100% ready for any sort of engagement that you take up, but are you comfortable saying yes to it? Like, I think that's where the first step is. If you're not even saying yes to opportunities, then you just never know where they'll lead you. And the same thing happened with this G20 Young Entrepreneurs Alliance Summit. I came across it with Futurepreneur Canada, who is basically the Canadian organization that goes through the nominations and selects the candidates that they're going to take as part of the Canadian delegation to these summits. And because I came across this organization as I was just trying to network and build a network of entrepreneurs who are similar to me in age and early stages of their business, is like, how are you navigating certain challenges? That's really how I approached this entire thing. And one thing led to the other, and I found out that applications were going on, and I was like, whoa, okay, this is, and it just, one thing leads to the other, and the pieces just fell into place. You share what you're doing as a business, and you'll be surprised how many people are there to support you. It's just that you have to be willing to share that information, and make sure you're prepared to share that information, right? Like, you know what you want to offer, and is there something of value that you can offer to this organization. So that's how it happened. So last year was my first year attending it. It was in Germany. It was amazing. We got to connect with entrepreneurs from around the world, the G20 countries. And it was really a a moment where I dropped my hat as a healthcare provider for the very first time. And I really put on the hat of a business owner or an entrepreneur. To be honest, like it was the first time where nobody cared that I was a pharmacist. Like, you know, all they cared about was I had a business that was growing, that was blooming, and that's all. And, you know, all they were looking to share was best practices. We were talking about how can we help each other. And you know, like the second year I applied this year as well. And I applied because I was really wanting to kind of understand the digital space in India. And this summit is happening in India this year. So, you know, luckily got selected again. So I'm excited that in July, I'll be going to India to, you know, take part in this summit.
That's so amazing. Honestly, so
Thank you.
amazing. And one thing, again, every time we speak, I always pick out the most important parts for me. And you mentioned going for something, even if you don't feel ready for it. I try to keep that mindset, even when I'm doing like content and sharing my content. You know, it doesn't have to be super perfect all the time. It doesn't have to be like, you know, gloss and glamour every single time. It's just being able to put out the work that you're doing, showing forth the great things or the great skills that you already have, even if you don't feel that you're the best at it. And I think doing that and putting yourself out there definitely helps you to grow.
I think when you put yourself out there, and when you put yourself out there with the humility of, you know, being cognizant that you do not know enough. And I think even conveying that to the other person or the other party that you are, you know, engaging in a conversation with, I think it shows a humbleness that a lot of us admire. And I think that in itself opens up a lot more doors. But I think, you know, being honest and truthful about it is also that much more important, just so that you are, you know, making sure that you're addressing your own weaknesses, and then you know how can people support you in terms of making sure that you're able to deliver whatever you're saying yes to.
Aska, thank you so much. Honestly, I think every single time we chat, always so inspiring. I learned so much from you, so thank you so much.
Thank you.
My last question for you is, how can people reach out to you? If people want to find you, they want to connect with you, they want to network, how can they find you? What platforms can they find you on?
Sure. I think LinkedIn is the best way to find me, to be honest. You know, just look me up, Aska Patel, on LinkedIn.
Aska also has an amazing podcast called the Diverse Conversations podcast. It's such an inspiring podcast, so make sure you check it out on YouTube. It's also on Spotify and iTunes, I believe. It's on all different podcast platforms, so make sure you check it out. I'll put all the details in the description box. They also have an Instagram page, so make sure you're following them and checking out all the great content they have. Thank you so much, Aska. I really appreciate you taking the time to be here.
Absolutely. And I just wanted to say thank you once again for having me here. It's truly an honor. You know, I think what you're doing is incredible work, and you are just as much of an inspiration to me in terms of how you're challenging status quo and breaking down barriers. And I would just say keep on doing it, because your work is highly valuable and much needed. So thank you for all that you do.
Thank you so much. Take care.